Hi.
How's it
We're
going?
going to start by asking you some general questions. It's better if you answer like in a complete sentence. So if I say like, "What's your name?" Like you say, "My name is," kind of thing. Typical
Okay.
interview stuff. You could just start by telling us who you are. Start with your name. Give us a little brief biographical sketch of yourself, if you don't mind.
Well, yeah, sorry. My name is Miguel del Real. I'm a local artist from Pilsen, former educator. Now I'm a more freelance artist.
We'll take that one.
Yeah, I'll do it again, yeah. But like, a little bit of like the history or just like name
Tell us
or
where you grew up, where you're from, education if you want to.
Okay.
So let's just take two on that and say, tell us about yourself.
Okay. How's it going? My name is Miguel del Real. I'm a visual artist from Pilsen neighborhood, originally from La Villita, Little Village. I grew up in Little Village, but I kept coming to Orozco from 5th grade and on, so kind of like between both neighborhoods, like living in Little Village, but coming to school over here in Pilsen, and then just been living here in Pilsen for like the last 12 years.
Can you tell us a little bit about growing up in Little Village? What was that like, I assume, in the 90s?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, like, one of the main things about, one of the main problems that facing here in Chicago growing up is always being pulled in different ways, so I mean, both positive and negative, but there's not a lot of like resources or a lot of opportunities for youth out there to venture off, like either in sports, or everything is just very not as available as. So for me, art was kind of like my way to kind of like start connecting with other neighborhoods or other people, to not enclose myself with the just limited with the mentalities that are from block to block or neighborhood to neighborhood, without pinpointing specifics.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the arts? I assume you were a kid when you started?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it always kind of like started from replicating from like cartoons, from like Ninja Turtles, and never really taking it serious. Just something to do while you're bored in class and just daydreaming, and then it just kind of like naturally, once I transferred over to Orozco, being under teachers like Mr. Mendoza, rest in peace, Mr. Pino, got the opportunity to meet Carlos Cortez, come in and do a couple workshops, poems. So under their tutelage and their kind of like their mentalities or the teachings about like what art is or what it was in terms of like culturally or even specific to like neighborhood, or it just naturally got me interested, so I got back into drawing. And
I assume that some of the teachers you mentioned were Latino art educators. Did the fact that they were Latino affect your ability to see yourself as an artist as a kid?
at that point, I just never really took it serious. It was more like experimenting, but it was, like the Francisco Mendoza was one of the ones that did the mosaics. He's got, the original Roscoe is just down the street, like by Polina. That's the one that I attended, and Francisco Mendoza was the one that did the mosaics there, and the one over here on Damon. So I mean, having that like as, he also was one that painted the platform with on 18th Street, the pink line. So I guess having that, it's just kind of like presented as a possibility, as it can be done, like somebody that could be, just work but do something that they're passionate about, like just art. So I guess that kind of ingrained it in my subconscious, and I didn't take it seriously till later on.
Can you tell us about how you do start to take it seriously? Like a lot of kids, you're just dabbling, just experimenting, as you put it, copying those Ninja Turtles. How do you start to take it more seriously?
I guess it started with like developing an identity, and like I was talking about, like the outcomes in the neighborhood, or like what's available in the neighborhood. For me, I started venturing into doing graffiti. I mean, it was not a way out of gangs, because I mean there's parallels and things like that with it, but I mean it's it kind of at least gave me like that pass where I could go home and not be bugged by anybody, not be. It just kind of like gave me the doorways to like come into my neighborhood like at 12 in the morning, 1, and not worry about being checked in my neighborhood, you know. So I guess graffiti just opened up the doorways for me to start taking it, challenge myself, because graffiti is very competitive. It's all about style and always evolving, always transforming, and I think that's what pushed me in terms of evolving from letters to images. And
how'd you get started in graffiti?
7th, 8th grade, just doing letters, just by doing letters. It wasn't until high school that I started actually applying it onto stuff that's not as, you know, unsanctioned property. So I mean, it wasn't until that I started kind of like hanging around with other kids that were like, oh, well, I was interested in the style of it, but I didn't know anything about it in terms of like the rules or what you call a certain style or throw-ups or tags and I think in high school is when I started hanging around with other kids that were into graffiti. We just kind of, well, I started solidifying myself a little bit more in terms of that.
We've got a lot of questions about graffiti, something we've been studying for a while, and asking like, how does graffiti relate to muralism? Like is graffiti an important training ground for muralists, etc.? Like, do you have anything to tell us about why graffiti is important? You know, some people might be coming to this neighborhood and see graffiti and think like it makes it the hood, or it makes it has a negative impact on the neighborhood. Like, do you think graffiti is important?
I would say so. It's the core, you know, it's the core of the neighborhood. It's like the rawness of the neighborhood, you know. It's like you hear, you could have like a 5-year-old girl writing her name with chalk on the street. It's telling you something, you know. That's still kind of graffiti, but it's still removable, you know. But once somebody gets a little bit older and starts writing their name or their boys or their group or their clique, and then it starts kind of like, but it's all identity. So I would say it is important, because it is telling you about identities that you are bumping shoulders with in the neighborhood, you know, like whether doing something good or bad, it's still the voice of the people here. So I mean, in the artistic form, how graffiti is important, I would say that it is, because it teaches you the structure, the components to even like how to make something artistically, in a sense.
What would you say to people who would tell you graffiti is illegal, there should be high penalties, lock up kids who are doing graffiti? Do you have a response for people kind of with that kind of opinion?
I mean, I see it, I understand it. If you want to think about it in the sense of like damage and property, and like you're affecting somebody else's property and taxpayers' property. But when you're in a neighborhood or in a place where there's not a lot of resources for kids to have a voice and feel like they matter, we live like in a sexist, ageist, you know, segregated, so everything's all about like, you don't have a voice, you know, even in your own household, talking with your family because you're 5 years old, it doesn't matter what you're saying because you're 5, you know, and you're not 19, so it doesn't matter what you're saying, it's nonsense. So if that person were to take their voice and put it out somewhere, now it matters, you know. So I mean, I would say it does kind of teaches you fundamentals of at least diving into your voice, whether it's with letters or with images, but it's diving into that.
So you started out doing graffiti, it's part of your training. How do you get more formal training in your own life?
Well, everything falls back to, again, the style, what I was saying, like, to like how you sketch, you know, like whether your sketches are good or they need more improvement, or so I guess to me that motivation was like to better yourself. So I mean, it's very clear if you're putting something that is, you know, like it needs more work, people are going to see it, and you could see it yourself too where you need to improve. So I mean, it's.
So how did you continue your art education after high school?
Well, I was all over the place. I still didn't take it seriously. It was something that I was getting in trouble for doing graffiti. Got arrested for doing graffiti, so I mean, that kind of pushed me off a little bit in terms of giving it a break a little bit, just because of those repercussions. And then I started learning. Well, I went to college during that time, and I started learning more about, like, again, Latin American history, or even like just history in general, and about different themes. And in college, it kind of brought me back into doing it again. Yeah.
When you arrived at university, did they take graffiti art seriously? Did you have any battles to fight in that regard?
Well, I feel like it's starting to be taken a little bit more seriously due to the components that it has, like the typography components, the perspective that it teaches you, like to give it a depth and dimension, or even the color theory behind it. I mean, but graffiti, in essence, I think it's still taken as a negative for, they still attach it to like gangs and marking up territory, and it's still with that mindset.
So what did you have to learn to go from graffiti to sort of other stuff, which, I mean, we've been surveying your work, it still draws heavily on, I think, graffiti iconography and typography, as you mentioned, but how did you get, in what ways did you need to grow as an artist when you were in university or after?
I mean, what I saw in the university, what I needed to grow on was more about having, refining that voice, what I was saying a little bit, because I mean, if they teach you techniques that have been done before, they teach you the fundamentals of like how to mix color, what looks good in a composition, or even how to arrange it, but it still doesn't teach you your voice. So to me, it just kind of like, by being in a setting outside of what I'm used to, it kind of pushes you to either be stronger with your identity, or kind of like retract a little bit in terms of like assimilate a little bit. So I just chose to kind of use the things that I grew up around me, and then just kind of like form a voice in that sense, by mixing calligraphy, by mixing like sacred geometry components from like pre-Columbian cultures and all over the world, so it's just putting those elements together and tying them in.
Did you take Latino studies courses or anything like that to help you?
Say that again?
Did you take Latino studies courses or anything in that realm to sort of think, that helped you think about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, even in like Orozco, from like what I was mentioning with Francisco Mendoza, we had to do like ASIC projects since like way back then. So to me, it was already there. It just kind of like helped it to learn more about like other cultures in college, like the moche in Argentina that I was not aware of, and they're not mentioned in textbooks at all, or even, like other Zapotecas, so even cultures like that you don't hear often. So it really did ground me in a sense of like, to I guess tap into that style visually a little bit more, and also know about my culture a little bit more as well.
So speaking of that, we're sitting in front of this amazing piece of work that you did. Can you tell us about how you got this commission and what it is?
This wall has been like a process. Like, it's been a couple of years. Underneath this wall, there was like a mural that had been here for like 23 years, 24 years, that depicted, it was like smaller scale. It only reached probably by that second gated door, and it was probably up to like 8 feet high. So I was teaching at Rudy Lozano, an alternative high school over here, and then like, and one of the teachers was dating, is still dating, the daughter of who's the owner of Caminos. And like, at first it was talks to paint the bar like Caminos de Michoacán, and then that project fell through, and I ended up touching base again, but they were interested. They were interested again in a mural, but they wanted to redo this one right here. And
Do they live here? Or?
yeah, the owners. Well, the ones that commissioned the piece are the owners of like Caminos, which is like a karaoke and bar, which is down the block, and they live in this building. And they were the ones that had the other mural, and they were the ones that commissioned the other mural that had been there for like 20-something years. So they wanted to revitalize it, so they kind of like brought me along in the picture. But I didn't want to go over it. Like I was talking to Mario a little bit right now, because I would have to go like into the unspoken rules, or like what, like as another artist to another artist. I didn't want to touch it because I didn't know who the original artist was. Like once I started going over this mural, it was like that repercussion of going over it, or because it was not my work, or to redo it. I didn't want to redo it because it was not my vision to in the first place. So so yeah, after talks of like with the patrons who commissioned it, or the people that commissioned it, we decided to go with the same theme, and then just kind of like give it a whole different feel, but still keeping the theme.
Can I back up a little bit?
Yeah.
Can I just get you on tape describing what was here before, like the existing mural?
Yeah. So the mural that was here before, it was done with spray paints. It was one of the name is like just went top of my head, but the crew that painted it. So they were a local graffiti crew that were from here around Pilsen. A couple of guys that painted with spray paint. I think it was even still early around those times to have like murals with that sort of detail in spray paint. So they depicted the whole Virgin Mary scenes, but like in almost like a comic book strip. Like first you had the scene of like her appearing in El Cerro, and then like the second scene was like when he was showing them to the priest, and then the third one when she appears on if I could recall it correctly, at the top of my head.
Before, middle, after telling the story of the apparition.
Exactly.
You mentioned an unwritten rule of muralists. That's so important to us to understand. Like, what does that mean to you?
Well, like we were discussing, right? Like it's like so many fields on it. Like if you want to look at graffiti, it comes with rules. It comes with levels. If you want to look at street art, it's the same politics. And muralism, it's like a whole nother conventional murals with the traditional muralist. So it's all rules within that.